the prepared group for business growth. We are super excited to have with us today a very special guest. However, before you get to meet him, you first have to hear from David.
I like how it's have to, not get to. Thank you very much. So we've been doing this now. This is our second week for highlighting a business, and what we're doing is we're going through and talking about some of the elements of the our approach to analyzing a business and looking at their marketing and marketing systems holistically. And it is a process that we do with every business we work with, where we look at everything from where they first connect with, identify that prospect, bring that prospect into the fold, maybe nurture that prospect, and then bring that prospect more opportunities to work with them and derive referrals and additional business out of it. And so we're going to talk about a little bit of that today. We can't bite all of it off in the short time that we have together, but we're going to dive in and chat with our guest Josiah in just a moment about one or two of these elements in his business.
Yes, and joining us today is indeed the one, the only Josiah Philipsen. He is the CTO at Next Tech Consultants. He's been doing this for about 5 years now. We're going to hear a little bit about his journey. Previously, he was the senior systems engineer over at the one and only George Fox University, my alma mater, and maybe yours as well. And without further ado, here's Josiah to tell you a little bit about how he came to be in the position that he's in today.
Yeah, so like I said, my name is Josiah Philipsen. I started Next Tech Consultants about 5 years ago. And there was people asking us for help, people asking us to kind of support them in their needs. So a little bit of history, though. I started, unlike most IT people, I started out in elementary education, which is kind of different. So I actually taught for a year and a half out in Bethel Christian School in McMinnville. And then after that, when budget cuts around that time happened, they cut most of their middle school program. And that's when I moved into technology as a system support, computer support specialist 1 at George Fox University at their Portland campus. And then I did a little bit of consulting after that, and then went back to George Fox. And finally, after starting my business, clients kind of kept picking up. They were all just referrals from a client to another. I didn't even have a web page. I made it super hard for people to find me. I didn't have a web page. Nobody knew my number unless you were my friend or a client. My email really isn't that easy to spell. And my name isn't either. So it was really hard for people to find me. About a year ago, I got my website up. And then about 4 months ago, about a month before coronavirus hit us, I quit my full-time job and decided to do consulting full-time. And that's kind of where we're at now. Yeah.
Excellent. And when you started this, was the aim always to kind of make it your full-time thing?
It actually wasn't. When I started, I just figured I would support people. It'd be kind of friends and family. As people started referring me more, it started getting so busy that I couldn't handle doing it myself. So I have a couple people that work with me and help me balloon out when I need to. And that's what I was doing for a while. And then eventually, it was actually a recruiter called me and was like, "Hey, we think you might be good at this position." And after talking to the recruiter, he said, "You're dumb because you'd have to quit your job. You'd have to leave your business to come do this position. So you shouldn't do that." So it's kind of in that moment when my wife and I sat down and we're like, he's right. Like, what am I doing? Like, I'm killing myself. I'm not spending as much time with my family as I had hoped. I'm not really doing good in either jobs. I feel like I'm letting everybody down. So that was kind of the point when I realized I needed to quit and kind of move on and go into consulting.
Excellent.
So we had a little bit of a chat last week and got an insight into sort of where the business has been and where there might be opportunity for you to grow. You are working with a lot of different clients, some of whom are clustered together in similar business types, and then some who just don't fit in that business type. Can you kind of talk a little bit about who you work with and where you kind of enjoy working the most?
Yeah, so I do have an educational client here in town, and for them, it's just fun to work with because my background is education, so I understand it. It's a lot of fun to work with them. I do also support 4 different restaurants at this time,
Mhm.
and my family grew up. My dad was a cook my whole life. I actually cooked through college and at George Fox, their cafeteria for a few years. So I understand that industry really well.
Mhm.
And a lot of people, when you get into an industry and people don't understand it, it's very hard to support them because you don't know how the inner workings are. A lot of the point of sale systems that the restaurants use are different because they have to wait tables, all of that. So it's been really fun to meet with those people and kind of use the history that I have in my past to kind of help them with their technology and grow. And then I have a few residential clients. I do have a couple retail and just some other small clients that are around.
Okay. You know, one of the things that I find challenging about some businesses is that uh, the general public doesn't have any idea what they do, even if they need that business, right? And so
Mhm.
there's often a point of entry or an initial point of connection with the business that is more obvious to your prospective client than others, right? As I've learned a little bit about what you do, there's a lot of things like all those wires behind that wall that lead somewhere and connect things, right? That's what most businesses think about what you do, right?
Uh-huh.
And yet there's stuff that is very obvious and very present. Is it clear to you what your prospects out there know about and don't know about in terms of what you can deliver to them?
I think it's very much a gray area. So a lot of similar to your company, people think IT and they just think you can do everything that has to do with a computer. That's not necessarily true. I don't, like I told you guys before, I don't really do websites or marketing. That's not really a thing. But when people think IT, they think it's all inclusive. And while I can help connect them to you or connect them to other people, that's not something that we really focus on. But when you're going out to a client, they don't really know. So I like to spend an hour on build, just an initial consultation, sit with them, look at what they have, look at what they're going through, and kind of see in areas that I can help. So whether it's with a firewall, so you can do remote connections through a VPN, whether it's your computers are outdated and you're waiting way too long for programs to load. So let's save your employees time, which saves costs, so we can get your employees to be more efficient in what they do. So I like to, when I walk around with that first initial client, I kind of sit with them and say, hey, here's the areas that we can help you improve. Um, and if there's something in there that I think would be really helpful for them, like marketing or like uh, kind of other aspects of business, I like to refer other people and say, hey, I know somebody who could help you here. Because it's my goal. While I love technology and I love doing it, it's a tool for a business, not, it shouldn't be something that's a burden on them. Um,
Mm.
I like it. One of my clients, they told me I sent them a computer. It's a remote client out in Northeast Oregon. And she emailed me back and was like, this was the best computer handoff I've ever had. And I was just so excited to hear that because I've never once saw her. I never once did any of that.
Mhm.
I literally backed up her computer, emailed it to her, or mailed it, not emailed. You can't do that. Um,
You email the
mailed it.
computer.
Would that be awesome? Download it now. um, yeah, mailed it to her. And it's things like that where, yes, I understand IT, but I think there's so much more to offer people than just, hey, here's your computer and walk away.
Sure. Sure. So this was, a conversation that we'd had previously where understanding what the client knows about where they might call you in, as sort of the first point of contact. Is there some common theme that you see? Are there places where you're regularly, either starting a conversation, hey, can you help with fill in the blank kind of stuff?
Yes. A lot of that is my computer's not running well. Like they notice the computer slowness, they give me a call. Can I clean it up for them? Can I make it better? I have gotten calls where all of a sudden, like their computer just died, and so they need a new one. How do I help them set that up quickly? Um, Recently, I had a client reach out because his hard drive crashed and he couldn't get any data off. So we took it in, did what we could, and there's data retrieval companies, and so we help them with that. And so things that where their technology is not functioning right, like their computers, a lot of clients call me because they don't think they're PCI compliant or they don't know. Like a lot of the restaurants, you get an email that says, "Hey, you broke PCI compliance," and they don't know why. They don't know how to fix it. So I can go in. I've gone in and helped the restaurants kind of come back into PCI compliance where they're at.
So let's chat a little bit now about kind of where you have been in terms of business, developing your business and getting new clients, and where you think you would like to be going. Ken, do you want to kind of walk through this
Yeah.
this part of the conversation?
Yeah. So do you have I guess where we start is, do you have any written goals? Hey, this is what I want to be in the next 6 months, in the next year, that you can grab a piece of paper or a Word document and say, yeah, this is it.
Not written down.
Okay.
So that's the first step I need to do. But really, it's I need like, how do I want to explain that? Part of it is driving up what I make so I can bring on employees and I can actually help my customers better with having a larger staff. So I know numbers where I have to get to this certain amount so where I can hire somebody full time with me. Um, and really, it's my goals are kind of really focusing regionally, like we just talked about before this call, is I really want to focus regionally and kind of when you think of like IT help in Yamhill County and the surrounding area, you think of Next Tech Consultants. That's and kind of taking over this regional area so people know who I am first of all, because for so long and even now people don't. So really just getting my name out there in this area and then kind of growing through Oregon. My like future long-term goals is having a couple different consulting sites around Oregon where people can stop in and get help and doing that. But that's like 15, 20 years down the road where
Let's focus on 6 months down the road.
yeah.
What does winning for Next Tech look like 6 months from now?
I think it would be picking up a few more clients that I can help. I would like to
How many is a few?
5 or 6. It's really
Okay.
like a few, not tremendously. So I want to grow at a pace where I can help my clients, and I don't become so big that I can't help them too quickly.
Okay.
So I'm careful not taking on clients that are too large where I don't want to help them, or not don't want to. I can't help them, and I think there's a fine line there. So, like we talked about before, my focus is really on smaller businesses, and so I can support more smaller businesses, but growing to where I can pick up probably 4 or 5 more clients in the next 6 months is kind of my goal.
Okay. And how do you see those clients finding you right now?
Um, that's a good question. Right now, my focus was really getting it ready so I could onboard those clients. And so
Okay.
finally now I'm going to start looking at more like Google AdWords focused in Yamhill County, looking at kind of I set up my website about a year ago. So I need to kind of now that I'm trying to get dialed into more different service providing offers, trying to define that more on my website so it's easier to navigate.
Okay.
Um, and then driving people there through the Google AdWords if I could have gone out to like chambers and meeting people, um, I would have been doing that by now already. And that's a really good question. I don't really have a good answer for that.
Okay.
Um,
And that's
because
okay.
Yeah,
Like,
because in the last month, my whole marketing plan was just shot. Like I'm like, oh, I'm going to go out chambers. I'm going to go to these other places, start meeting people, um, and grow slowly that way. So I've also been started a YouTube channel for Next Tech and just kind of trying to put up how-to videos, things that people would be helpful. So that's kind of using that with Google AdWords, kind of building a brand where when people search it, it's easier to find me too.
okay, so looking at like some organic means, maybe some networking,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. David, do you want to talk a little bit about the who, or do we want to talk a little bit more about the what the funnel ought to look like?
Yeah, well, let me
Go.
share some feedback
Yeah.
from just what was discussed here, because this is a very common set of decisions that a business would make. Not necessarily specifically making videos and pursuing AdWords, but they will latch onto a particular path of how before they consider the who. And this is a very important consideration, because if you have a clear sense of the who, right? What business type do you want to work with? Do you want to work with just residential clients? Do you want to be working with only restaurants or only retailers? It's going to give you a bit more insight into where and how they are most likely to be looking for somebody like you.
Mm.
And it may or may not be the case that AdWords or YouTube videos are going to be the right path to meet that ideal client. And so one of the things that we really stress when we work with a client is figuring out, and it could be many different who's, but figuring out where those individuals are going to best connect with you in order to determine where your time and money in getting found is best spent.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe let's take a little bit of time to talk a little bit about, who those ideal client types might be, to help figure out if the course that you were just talking about may or may not be the best fit.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to chat a little bit? I
Yeah.
asked you who you work with and who you enjoy working with. We had a very brief conversation about, if you were to niche down and get more specific, who that might be. Do you remember what you said?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember I said, so my focus has always been small, mid-sized businesses. So like 200 employees or less, which obviously that's a tremendous amount of people. Like I think this came out the other day. It was like what, 60, 70% of businesses are in that range because there's so many small, mid-sized. So like, I enjoy restaurants. I have an educational background, so I enjoy working with education institutions. I also, because of that, I enjoy teaching and helping people learn and doing those things. But even in our small conversation, is I don't, outside of like, hey, I want to reach out to small mid-sized business, I don't have a good niche. I haven't focused on a specific client, because I don't know why. I just haven't been like, okay, I really want to focus on this.
So here's what I would say. One, small business isn't a niche,
Yeah.
right? Is small business is a conception,
Mhm.
but let's not pretend, and I don't want to be too crass here, but let's not pretend that that's a niche, right?
Yeah.
Because technically speaking, the 10 largest employers, whether it's Cascade Steel or ADEC or George Fox, who are the top 3 in Yamhill County, right?
Hmm.
They're all technically small business,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And ADEC employs what, 1,000-ish people, maybe a few less right now, right? Fox is what, 550, give or take,
Hmm.
right? And so small business means a ton of different things. Are you looking at ways that we can niche? Can be by size, it can be by location, and it can be by industry as well as some other things.
There's many others. I mean,
Yes.
you could niche based on business model. You
Yeah.
could niche based on facility type. I work in offices that have fewer than 10 employees. It could be obviously based on industry, which we've discussed, and it can actually be the reverse. It may not be the niche about them. It could be a niche about you. I solve this specific problem. Right. That's
Mhm.
really where we focus a lot of our business, is not on who we work with, but on the psychographic of the individual we work with. They have a desire to grow and be more organized and intentional about their growth. Right.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of different ways to niche. It's not just pick a industry and go.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I think in that, the challenge is when you say, okay, I'm going to just run Google AdWords in Yamhill County,
Yeah,
right? Well, how many businesses are there in Yamhill County?
a lot.
Several thousand, probably, maybe
Yeah.
more, right? Uh, are we talking, hey, I want to work with wineries, farms, right? What
Mhm.
is it? Just Yamhill County? Are you not willing to go over to um, St. Paul and
Washington
work with
County.
somebody
Yeah.
over there, right? Because
Yeah.
that's Marion County,
Yeah.
right? And so figuring out some of those specifics and saying, well, who, where, and to what end? Because in many ways, Sherwood, which is Washington County, is closer to you than McMinnville,
That's true.
right?
Yeah.
And so what and are there more opportunities for you there? Right? Is there
Yeah.
more competition? I don't know. Right? Because if you're in Beaverton, do you really want to have to go all the way to Sherwood to
Yep.
serve with somebody?
Yeah.
You know? And so I think that's part of what you have to figure out is understanding there are many, many specifics, but the more specific you are, the less waste there fundamentally is in what you're planning.
Mhm.
Because if it's, look, in the next 6 months, I need to sign 6 new clients, right? That's great. At what value? What kind of client? To what
Mhm.
type of term,
Mhm.
right? I don't imagine you're going to be really thrilled if you get 6 households that need one break fix to their computer,
True.
right? And so
True.
that's where it's defining this and then saying, oh, well, based upon what my goal is, right, I can see how I can achieve that by going after this thing,
Mhm.
right? But what we want to avoid in general, what we recommend you avoid in general, is the shotgun approach that says, I'm going to just start running ads in Yamhill County, right? I may be mistaken, but Willamina is still in Yamhill County. And that's
True.
from where we live, right here in Newburgh. That's as
So
far as it is to get to downtown Portland,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And do you have the same level of opportunity there?
No.
You know,
Yeah.
but now some guy wants you to come fix his home PC in Willamina, and you've spent money on this,
Mhm.
right? And so I think that's what we're talking about is maybe we start with this discussion of, well, is my niche personal or is it business, right? And I know that you said kind of in your opening that you serve both. Is one of those better for you? Is one of those give you more opportunity? Like, where do you see yourself, 2 or 3 years from now, if you walk down each of those paths?
Yeah. And so for me, I know I do serve both right now. I've been trying to get out of residential because it's just most of the residential are business owners that I help also.
Okay.
Um, so really my focus isn't residential. It's more business.
Okay.
I,
Let me add one additional little caveat. You brought up a really good point, which and you have not said this, but many business owners do. They are resistant to niching because they think that it means that it's going to close out their ability to do work with anybody else.
Mhm.
And in fact, you've just shown us, right? You are working with a business owner already, and they say, "Oh, by the way, can you also do this for me at home?"
Mhm.
So niching isn't necessarily cutting you off from the ability to accept business, but it is streamlining your ability to target the individuals you want. And as you do that, your profile gets raised within a narrower community.
Mhm.
But there are plenty of people, and believe me, I think Ken and I can both attest to this from our experience, who say, well, I know you do this, but could you also do this? Or can you also help me? It
Yeah.
always happens.
Yeah. Well, that's always been one of my like is how to niche and how to, because obviously in like how you market, you can niche to people, but how do you do that without forcing away other clients that need the same type of service?
Mhm.
They're just not listed in your niche market. Like if I start changing marketing material to go for restaurants specifically, and you're not a restaurant, but you come, do like it's not like I don't want to support you. So I think that's always kind of the question there with
So,
niching is
so
like,
here's the challenge with that is you're right in that there is this risk that you're going to drive that business away.
mhm,
My question though is how many more restaurants are you going to get that otherwise you would not have because of this? And so I think the human condition is we default to fear of loss, right? And there's been many behavioral economics and psychological studies that show losing something is more painful than winning is pleasurable, right?
yeah,
And so the default mindset is, oh gosh, I'm going to drive away this guy that I would have loved to work with and I could have made
yeah,
money on because I said restaurants. Stupid. Why did I do that?
yeah,
Right? Instead of asking the more rational question, which is, if I say I do everything under the sun, does a restaurant have any reason to believe that I'm going to support them well? And
yeah,
I think most importantly, tying this back to kind of where we started, is if you sign 6 new restaurants, does that meet your goals and trajectory planning ends? If the answer is yes, and you know what, you lost another business you could have worked with, so what?
it's a really good point.
Right? I mean,
Yeah,
I know that that's kind of an emotional, like, hard point, but so what? Yeah, you lost some opportunity, but you
yeah,
hit your goal,
yeah,
right? And now 3 months into this, you're doing all this restaurant stuff, right? And you say, man, I am nowhere near my goal. Well, now let's change something,
yeah,
right? Let's pivot.
And
But
in a pivot like that, just to bring it back to something that we discussed earlier, which is that you don't need to necessarily say, all right, I already got these 4 restaurant clients. I'd like to get more restaurant clients, and then it's not working. You don't necessarily need to go to dentist offices or in big industrial plants or whatever. You could do something very relevant. So you just expand a little bit so that your marketing is still relevant. So maybe it's restaurants and retail, and
mhm,
therefore you have a very similar business model. They have point of sale systems. They have a lot of the same needs. They have the customers who are coming into their space, and they might have a lot of the same kind of mechanical needs that you would address in either environment.
mhm,
So there's pivoting doesn't necessarily have to be extreme.
right. And so the other side of this, though, that I'd like to kind of delve into just briefly is what's the value of a particular customer to you? And here's what I mean. Let's
yeah,
say that you're really, really good at restaurants and you know all of that point of sale stuff, right? And you know how to set it up and you know how to deal with the iPads and the vendors and you get all of that, right? What that means theoretically is your cost to service that customer is lower because it's more natural to you and it's faster.
yep,
So you can charge the same amount, but because
mhm,
you're more talented, more experienced, you can get the work done relatively faster.
mhm,
I drop you into a dentist office, to use David's example here, you don't know the POS, you don't know maybe the specific CRM or other computer security requirements. Maybe you're not really great with all the HIPAA stuff. And now that takes you a lot longer to learn. So yeah, maybe you're making the same amount of money by signing that contract, but what are you actually spending to fulfill the contract? And does that actually trickle down to your bottom line?
Hmm.
Or is it growth on the top line, but it stays up there? That's one of the big risks we don't think about when we stay broad.
Hmm.
Is what does this actually do to my bottom line revenue?
Hmm.
If that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
And so that's something that I would really I don't want to on a live stream here get into your specific numbers, though normally we would, and I would ask you those specifics. I'd like you to really sit down and look at your numbers and ask yourself the question: what do I actually make? What does it actually cost me to service this customer? And what would it cost for me to service a customer in a wildly different sector?
Hmm.
And does that answer to a degree the question of niching as it relates to growth? Because again, top line growth is not the same as bottom line growth,
Hmm.
right? Growing from a net profit perspective is not the same as growing from a gross profit perspective.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's a really important thing to think about. Is David's talking about the systems and the structures, and if we widen our niche, we widen just a little bit, because your knowledge base may only have to expand a little bit, instead of you've got to develop a whole new knowledge base, and what happens in that is you lose profitability.
Well, and you lose credibility too. I mean, if you start going into places that you don't know and you say you can and you can't deliver on that,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
absolutely. And so that's again going back to this idea of, well, I'm just going to run ads in Yamhill County, right? Well, how profitable do we expect that to be? Right? Is Hey, what happens is you get a call from a rural church in Willamina that needs you to set something up. Well, how much does it cost for you to actually service them? You've got to drive out there 5 times, right? Well, what's the
Yeah,
actual opportunity cost? What's
it's high.
the you know what I mean? And so let's
Hmm.
think about this in those terms of, well, in a perfect world, I would be doing this at this rate,
Hmm.
and I'd be able to do this much, because we got to also think about capacity, because niching increases capacity because it increases the uh, or decreases the time for systematic work,
Hmm.
right? And so anyway, I'll let David jump in from
Yeah.
there.
So here's where I think we might want to go with this, because I don't want to beat this horse anymore, if that's all right with you guys. But let's go through the let's go through the exercise that we often go through of, once we have figured out a niche that we might want to consider, how do you figure out, who they are, what makes them tick, where do you connect with them, what is the thing that they're going to respond to? So Josiah, do you have one that you'd like to try to use just as an experiment here?
Like a specific type of like restaurants. I mean,
Sure.
is
I
that
mean,
what you
yeah,
mean?
restaurants is
Yeah.
one that keeps coming up. But would
Yeah.
that be a worthwhile exercise for you?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's, one thing that is going to help you stand out to a restaurant more than anybody else, aside from saying, I specialize in helping restaurants, is saying something that is restaurant specific to them. So, mentioning POS is certainly, one of those things. Are there other things that you recognize that restaurants have in common that they all are concerned about or deal with, or might be a flashpoint for a problem that you could identify?
Yeah, a lot of them. So a couple of them come to me with PCI complaints because they run credit cards
Hmm.
and they're concerned whether it's secure to run them or not.
Okay.
So that's one. The Then, like I said, with Micros is the main POS in restaurants. There's a few others I could list off, but they're they need help with that. Whether they don't know how to use it, whether they use it, but all the reporting's wrong, nothing's working right. So those are kind of the main things that restaurants deal with, because they don't want to have to take the time to learn a point of sale system. They just want it working for them so they can cook the food or help their customers. So that's kind of, does that answer your question?
Sure.
Is that what you're?
So let's take one of those two examples and drill a little bit further in terms of, if they don't address those issues, what are they potentially exposed to, or what are the potential additional problems they might deal with? You want to pick one and kind of walk through that?
Yeah, so like PCI compliance, that's obviously, it's a big scare. A lot of business owners aren't sure. So if you're not PCI compliant, the credit card processing company can actually shut down your ability to process credit cards, which obviously for them is a huge loss. Either to tell somebody you can't pay with credit card, or to have to manually run their credit cards. There's higher fees. There's a lot of things that can cause. So I guess that's kind of the biggest fear or the biggest concern about not being PCI compliant.
Okay. So these two examples are good ones from one perspective, but not from another. Restaurants are either actively pursuing a solution to a problem they know they have, or they are aware that they have a problem, but they're kind of ignoring it. And a service provider like you has the ability to get their attention by reminding them of the problem, agitating the problem, and getting them to be willing to talk. Right. So one is proactive on your part, and one is more proactive on their part. And that's another place where we have the opportunity to kind of figure out, okay, well, we know who they are. We don't necessarily know where this engagement might take place or might start, but we do know, all right, the thing that it is of concern to them, and where we can at least start to get their attention and willingness to engage with us. Is this all pretty clear?
Yeah.
Right. So let's say this PCI compliance issue comes up. How many restaurants are out there searching for a solution to this right now, do you think?
Not as many, probably not too many.
Not too many. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So we probably are not going to run Google ads saying PCI compliant expert, click here, right?
Yeah.
So then how do we get in front of a restaurant that has to address this, ought to address this? There's a lot of different ways, but it really is more active on your part to initiate that. If again, I'm not sure that this is the best path to go down, by the way, but for the purposes of our discussion, it's at least identifying the process.
Well, if you want a better, sorry, we can continue identifying.
No, let's keep going with this one.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a few different ways that you could approach them. Ken, you had somebody who you were working with at one point in this industry who was dealing with security stuff, dark web stuff, kind of outreach. Can you talk about like how that kind of approach might work in this scenario with PCI compliance?
Yeah, it would be going to developing a list and going to a number of restaurants and asking them, hey, can we do a PCI compliance audit and understand what your current PCI risks are? Right. And it may be that they have none. It may be that they have a ton. But it's going in and asking that question, saying, hey, can we provide you with this PCI audit so that you can understand what exactly is happening here? That might be the easiest way. And that could be as simple as a mass email that you're sending out.
It could be cold calls. It could be a mass email. It could be a direct mail piece. It could be targeted ads to the right business professional. Although in the case of restaurant owners, it's probably not going to be a very easy approach. But there's lots of different ways that you can get the conversation started. Simply by going out with, and this is a very important piece of it, a specific offer. So right now, can you remind us what you do? You have this kind of initial meeting where you do a general assessment and come in for an hour.
Yeah.
do they know what it is that they're investing in for that hour? Like what they're going to get at the end of it? Or do they just know that some guy who knows, this technology stuff we don't understand is going to come and talk to us?
It's definitely that.
Okay.
They just know I'm going to come and talk to them.
Okay. Do you think it might be more valuable for them to know what they're going to get at the end of that hour?
Absolutely. I would want to know.
Yeah. And so figuring out how to position an offer or packaging an offer around what that hour is about can also be a lot more effective in getting people to say yes.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So, these are just the series of things that as we chip away at all of the possibilities, there's probably 10, 15, 20 different good fits.
Mm-hmm.
And the best ones are going to rise to the top, and you're going to go, oh yeah, I'm really most comfortable with this, or I really like the idea of, I could see myself doing this for the next 3 years. And so that's how we figure out which one makes the most sense to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
And we just prioritize them because maybe it works, and maybe it works so well that you're inundated with so much work that you have to hire a whole bunch of people, and then you're ready to take what you did there and move over to the next niche and replicate it, right? Much more effective than the gunshot approach that that Ken described earlier. I don't know where Wilhelmina is. I don't. Maybe I've driven through it, but sounds like it's a lot less desirable to put yourself in the position of not knowing who's going to call or click on an ad, if you have the ability to be in much more control over who is responding to what you're doing to market your business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's the big thing here is knowing who's responding, why are they responding, and what are they getting out of it? Thus, what is their expectation?
Yeah.
And then as you build more and more of this out, then you have the ability to create a website that speaks directly to them and these issues, rather than a website that is I forget exactly how you put it earlier, but I have to build out all of the different services that we provide onto the website, so that in case anybody clicks on any ad, and they come, that the one little thing that they want is represented in that list, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't it be so much easier to just align a very narrow list of things with a very specific, prospect?
Yeah,
right?
A lot easier.
Yeah. So. But believe me, this is not something that Ken or I. Well, Ken probably did. He's a lot smarter than I am. But wait, you're the better looking one.
Mine.
Wait,
wait, I'm better looking and smarter. Yes, anyway. That's winning right there, folks.
I will simply say that I'm not going to speak for Ken. I made this mistake so many times, and I tried to be everything to everyone, and it was a real struggle until I started niching down and focusing on something much more specific. Yeah, and it helped tremendously.
Yeah, I would agree in saying, going from, essentially saying, hey, this is what we can do. This is XYZ, and we can do whatever you need. To, hey, we're going to be very specific about what it is that you need, how it is that we can help you, and off we go. I mean,
yeah.
So there's a. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's even when you're talking with somebody and they just start listing off a bunch of random things that don't make sense. That's not enjoyable. But when somebody's like, "Hey, I do this, and this," it doesn't make sense. But if you're like, "Hey, I do this," it's like clear, it's cut, it makes sense.
Yeah,
and that's essentially what you guys are saying in this too. Is like, how do you market yourself, or how do you do your website or ads that are, I do this for you?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's not just that. It's what problem are you solving? Last week, Paul Sokol was on, and one of the things that he talks a lot about is this idea of if your prospect went to a bartender and sat down and they had a complaint, well, what's the complaint they would tell the bartender?
Hmm.
Right? And if you knew that, how would you speak to that? Right? Because
Mhm.
if you knew, hey, my complaint is my technology just doesn't work for me and it's a hassle. Right? Like there's a guy up in Tualatin. His whole catchphrase is taking the WTF out of the WWW. And that's his whole shtick, right? And I don't know if he's any good at it, but I know that people respond to that because they emotionally feel that,
Yeah.
right? And that's the question. What is that? What is it that somebody's struggling with, and what's their real problem that you're coming in and saying, "Hey, if that's the problem, let me tell you how we fix it." Right?
This is, why one of the reasons why I thought PCI compliance may not be the best place to go is that if it is an issue that is keeping them up at night, they're having nightmares about it. If they're really worried about addressing something, that's a much more natural fit than something they ought to know about or ought to address, but really have just been ignoring. And
Mhm.
so I always get the phrase wrong, but it's getting in the middle of the conversation that's going on inside their head is an old copywriting idea that is how do you present your offer or your preliminary offer to start the conversation in a way that they look at you and go, well, how did you just read my mind? I've been trying to deal with that.
Yeah.
Right. And often, our offers tend to be more logical attempts at persuasion rather than addressing somebody's real emotional challenges that they're dealing with.
Mhm.
And so there are plenty of angles that you can consider once you figure out the who. You figure out what is it that's really keeping them up at night. And you have the advantage of already working with people in at least the restaurant world, where you can go and do some easy research. Hey, before I showed up, what were you dealing with, and what was I able to fix for you? How did that make you feel? Right? Or what are you still dealing with? Or and so just asking questions, the more themes you hear in those answers, the more obvious it is what you should be marketing around.
Mhm.
All right, we got a lot of head nodding, and it looks like we may be coming up to the end of this conversation. Josiah, you have a lot of opportunity in a lot of different directions. I hope that we have an opportunity to continue this conversation beyond today. But for folks in the restaurant world or any other world who might be interested in learning about you and your services, where can they find you?
Yeah, so the easiest way is to go to my website. It's nexttechconsultants.com. Just so the two words, it's two T's, Next Tech Consultants. That's the easiest
Excellent.
way to find me, and my information's all on there.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, excellent. Ken, do you have anything you would like to add before we wrap things up today?
No, I think that other than just thank you so much for being here, and I hope this process was useful for you. Um,
It
and
is, and
David,
I
I
really,
enjoyed it.
yeah, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day too to talk with me. It's been fun. I really
Good.
do appreciate it.
We both love having these conversations with business owners because as much as we say this stuff and hear this stuff coming out of our mouths all the time, it's often new for most of the people we talk with, and we believe very passionately about this approach to getting rid of waste and increasing revenue in a business, and as a result. It's our little version of I was going to say a gospel to spread, which I guess it is sort of in a way. And so if we can help a business owner by having a little aha moment and then acting on it, which is really the key to all of this,
Yeah.
then these conversations and sharing them here in Facebook and on YouTube and elsewhere is really worth our time to investigate. So this has been great. Thank you so very much. And Ken, thank you. Let's get together again next Tuesday right here in our Facebook group.
Thank you guys so much.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.